The Florida sun blazed over an upscale neighborhood where pristine pools sparkled like mirrors against the manicured lawns. Among the luxurious homes, Daniel Carter, 25, moved briskly from one pool to the next, his uniform damp from the humidity. A pool boy with big dreams and even bigger struggles, Daniel had taken the job after his father's sudden passing left the family drowning in debt. His hands calloused from labor, Daniel worked tirelessly to support his mother's medical treatments and help his younger sister stay in school. Yet the weight of their financial burden felt inescapable. Every bill, every overdue notice chipped away at his hope for a better future. That evening, as he packed up his gear, his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He frowned, glancing at the unknown number flashing on the screen. "Hello, this is Daniel," he answered hesitantly. Voice, calm yet commanding, replied, "Mr. Carter, this is Victoria Harrington. I'd like to meet you. It's regarding an opportunity that may change your life." Before Daniel could ask for details, the line went dead. Bewildered but intrigued, he stared at the phone in his hand. Little did he know, his life was about to take a dramatic turn. Later that evening, Daniel found himself standing outside the towering gates of Victoria Harrington's estate. The sprawling mansion loomed like a fortress, its elegant design exuding old money and power. Swallowing his nerves, he pressed the intercom button. "Come in," the same authoritative voice instructed. The gates creaked open, and Daniel made his way up the long driveway. As he entered the grand foyer, his worn sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floor. Victoria was waiting for him in the sunlit conservatory, her silver hair gleaming under the soft glow of the chandeliers. She was dressed immaculately in a tailored suit, a pearl necklace resting lightly on her collarbone. "Mr. Carter?" she greeted, motioning for him to sit across from her. Daniel hesitated, then sank into the plush armchair. "What's this about?" Victoria leaned forward slightly, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. "You're struggling, aren't you? Between your mother's treatments and your sister's tuition, I can see how the bills are piling up." Daniel stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know," she said smoothly, "and I'm here to offer you a solution." He frowned, suspicion creeping in. What kind of solution? Victoria set down her teacup with practiced elegance. "Marry me." The words hit Daniel like a thunderbolt. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said evenly. "This isn't about romance, Mr. Carter. It's a business arrangement. I will clear all your debts, provide financial security for your family, and in return, you will be my husband." Daniel laughed nervously, shaking his head. "Why me? You don't even know me." Victoria's expression didn't waver. "Precisely. You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider this. I don't need love, Daniel. I need a companion, someone to share my name and estate for appearances, nothing more." "This is insane," he muttered. "What's in it for you?" Her gaze softened, just slightly. "I've spent my life alone. No family, no legacy. A husband solidifies my control over what I've built." The air grew heavy between them as Victoria leaned back, her calm composure unshaken. "Take your time to decide, but remember, this offer won't last forever." That night, Daniel sat at the small kitchen table in their modest apartment, the offer from Victoria Harrington weighing heavily on his mind. His mother, pale and frail, looked up from her cup of tea with concern. "She said she'd pay off everything," Daniel explained hesitantly. "All the medical bills, Ellie's tuition, even the mortgage. But—" He trailed off, unable to voice the unease gnawing at him. His younger sister Ellie glanced between them, her brows furrowed. "This doesn't sound right, Danny. Why would she do that?" "I don't know," he admitted. "She said it's a business arrangement, not love." His mother reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it over his. "Daniel," she said softly, "I know it sounds unthinkable, but if this could help us help you, it's worth considering." Daniel clenched his fists, torn between his pride and desperation. "You're asking me to marry a stranger just to save us?" he cried. "Save us? Why don't we just leave now?" "I'm asking you to save yourself," his mother whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The next morning, Daniel returned to Victoria's estate, She was waiting in the same conservatory, poised and confident as always. "You've decided," she said, without looking up from her tablet. Daniel took a deep breath. "I'll do it." Victoria set the tablet aside, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Good. The arrangements will be made immediately." A week later, Daniel stood in a quiet courthouse, wearing a suit Victoria had provided. The ceremony was brief, attended only by Victoria's lawyer and a notary. As they exchanged vows, Daniel's stomach churned with unease, the reality of his decision settling over him. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Carter," Victoria said with a small, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Later that day, a cab pulled up to the gates of her estate. Daniel stepped out, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder in someone else's world. The mansion loomed ahead, its towering columns and pristine facade more imposing than ever. Victoria greeted him in the foyer, her tone as formal as her posture. "Your room has been prepared. Dinner is at 7. He nodded mutely, following a housekeeper up the grand staircase. The room was opulent, with antique furniture and a king-sized bed, but it felt cold and unwelcoming, untouched by human warmth. As he unpacked, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he'd crossed into a world he didn't belong to, and that he might not leave unscathed. Days at the Harrington estate passed in a strange rhythm. The mornings were eerily quiet, the afternoons filled with whispers among the staff, and the evenings marked by stiff formal dinners where Victoria dominated the room with her icy composure. Daniel felt like an outsider, a guest trapped in a house that wasn't his. One night, as he wandered the cavernous halls, Daniel noticed a series of locked doors. The brass handles gleamed in the dim light, tempting him with the secrets they guarded. The whispers he'd overheard from the staff lingered in his mind. Feeling well-eaten meal? Why him? Does he even know? Bill never does anything without a reason. He'll figure it out eventually. The unease grew, gnawing at him like an unseen shadow. What had he gotten himself into? He'd relied on this place for years. How could he trip? The opportunity to seek answers came unexpectedly. One evening, while pacing the grand library, Daniel noticed a small, ornate key on Victoria's desk. Its intricate design gleamed under the soft glow of the desk lamp. His heart pounded as he reached for it, the weight of the key cold and solid in his palm. Late that night, with the key tucked in his pocket, Daniel crept down the hall. He paused at one of the locked doors, glancing over his shoulder to ensure no one was watching. The key turned smoothly in the lock, the soft click reverberating through the silence. The room beyond felt like a time capsule, frozen in an era long past. Dusty furniture and faded wallpaper surrounded him. On a side table, tarnished silver frames held photographs of a younger Victoria with a man who must have been her late husband. There were others, another couple he didn't recognize. But it was the stack of papers on the desk that drew Daniel's attention. He flipped through them, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. Legal documents detailing failed business deals between his father and Victoria's late husband. One letter, written in sharp, slanted handwriting, stood out. "You ruined everything. My family was left with nothing because of your lies." Daniel's breath hitched as he turned to the last page. A marriage license. His name and Victoria's were printed boldly on the paper, dated weeks before their wedding. She had planned this far in advance. Beside the papers lay an old leather-bound diary. Opening it, Daniel found entries in Victoria's handwriting, detailing a calculated plan for revenge. "Will be my pawn. I will take everything from him, just as his father took everything from me." Daniel froze as the door creaked behind him. "Enjoying yourself?" Victoria's voice sliced through the shadows, cold and sharp. He spun around, guilt and fear etched across his face. "What is this? Why did you really marry me?" Victoria stepped closer, her gaze unflinching. "Curiosity killed the cat, Daniel," she said icily. "But since you're so eager for answers, let me make one thing clear. This isn't about love. It never was." The tension between Daniel and Victoria escalated like a storm brewing over the estate. That night, as they sat across from each other at the long dining table, Daniel's mind raced with the revelations he'd uncovered. The usual extravagant dinner felt suffocating, and the silence between them was sharper than the polished silverware. Finally, Daniel set down his fork and looked directly at Victoria. "I know about my father," he said, his voice steady but laced with anger. Victoria paused mid-cut, her knife hovering over her filet mignon. "And?" she replied coolly, not bothering to look up. "You planned this," he accused, his hands clenching into fists. "The marriage, the debt, you orchestrated everything to trap me, all because of something my father did years ago." Victoria finally met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Your father ruined my family," she said, her voice calm but laced with bitterness. "My husband lost everything because of his lies. The stress killed him, Daniel. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Daniel's chest tightened. "So your solution was to ruin me? I had nothing to do with what he did." Victoria leaned back in her chair, her cold facade cracking just slightly. "It was never about you, Daniel. You were just a means to an end, a way to reclaim what I lost, a way to ensure your family understands the pain they caused mine." "This isn't justice, Victoria," Daniel shot back. "It's revenge, and it's destroying you more than it's hurting me." For a fleeting moment, something softened in Victoria's eyes. She set down her knife and dabbed at her mouth with a linen napkin, as though trying to compose herself. "You remind me of him, you know," she said quietly. "Harold, my husband. That same fire, that same stubbornness. I didn't expect to feel anything for you, but here we are." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected admission. "If you really feel that way, then stop this. Let it go before it consumes you completely." Victoria's lips curled into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "You don't understand, Daniel. Some wounds don't heal, and some debts must be paid." Before he could respond, she rose from her chair, her tone turning icy once more. "Stay out of matters that don't concern you. If you betray me, you'll regret it." As she left the room, Daniel sat frozen, her cryptic warning ringing in his ears. He had to find a way out, but one thing was clear: Victoria Harrington was not someone to be underestimated. Determined to uncover the full extent of Victoria Harrington's plans, Daniel reached out to his old friend Alex Marino, a junior attorney with a knack for handling complex legal issues. They met late one night in a quiet diner, away from the prying eyes of the Harrington estate. "Alex," Daniel began, leaning in close, "hypothetically, if someone signed a contract under coercion or false pretenses, could it be voided?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically?" he asked, his tone skeptical. Daniel hesitated before nodding. "Yes, hypothetically." "It's tricky," Alex admitted, pulling out a notebook. "You'd need solid evidence, documents, witnesses, anything that proves coercion or fraud." Armed with Alex's advice, Daniel began his search in earnest. Whenever Victoria was away, he scoured her office, piecing together her financial dealings and personal records. Late one night, he found the smoking gun, a letter addressed to his father, written years ago, accusing him of embezzlement and fraud. It was followed by contracts that detailed Victoria's efforts to rebuild her empire, including partnerships that bordered on illegal. Daniel handed the documents to Alex, who was stunned by their implications. "This isn't just about revenge," Alex said. "She's been engaging in fraud herself to recover her wealth. We can use this." But Victoria's sharp instincts caught wind of Daniel's growing unease. The morning after he found the documents, she confronted him in the breakfast room. "You've been busy, haven't you?" she said, her voice calm but her eyes razor-sharp. Daniel froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play coy with me," she said, leaning closer. "If you think you can outsmart me, you're mistaken. I've faced far tougher opponents than you, and for that..." Daniel held her gaze, forcing himself to remain steady. "I'm not your enemy, Victoria, but I won't be your pawn either." She straightened, her lips curling into a cold smile. "You'll regret crossing me, Daniel. Mark my words." The next day, with Alex's help, Daniel took his findings to the authorities. A private investigator corroborated the evidence, and soon warrants were issued. When the police arrived at the Harrington estate, Victoria maintained her icy composure. As she was led away in handcuffs, she turned to Daniel, her gaze piercing. "You think this is over, Daniel?" she said, her voice low and venomous. "Revenge isn't so easily undone. Be careful it doesn't consume you too." Daniel watched her leave, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. He had exposed the truth, but Victoria's words lingered like a shadow. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the gavel struck, signaling the end of Victoria Harrington's trial. Daniel Carter sat silently in the back row, watching as the once imposing woman faced the consequences of her actions. Despite everything, Daniel had testified on her behalf, helping to reduce her sentence. Not out of sympathy, but because he understood the pain and loss that had driven her. Days later, Daniel was summoned to the estate one last time. The once grand mansion felt hollow, its opulence overshadowed by the memories of what had transpired there. Victoria had arranged for him to inherit the property. Along with the deed, the estate lawyer handed Daniel a letter in Victoria's elegant handwriting. "Daniel, this was never about wealth. It was about justice for Harold, for the life we lost. But I see now that my obsession consumed me. You've shown me something I had forgotten, that moving forward takes more strength than looking back. Use this estate not as a monument to pain, but as a place of purpose." Victoria. Daniel sold the estate, paying off his family's debts and creating a scholarship fund in Harold Harrington's name to help others in need. Months later, as Daniel addressed the first scholarship recipients, he stood taller, his voice steady. "This isn't just about money," he said. "It's about second chances, about turning pain into purpose." Victoria's letter remained in his pocket, a quiet reminder of the transformative power of forgiveness and the strength to forge a new path.